Hi, I'm Larry Dignan with Constellation Insights, and I'm here with my merry band of analysts, and we're going to talk about DeepSeek and everything you need to know. So let's just start from the top. Ray, what the hell is DeepSeek, and why is everybody freaking out?
Yeah, so basically, a Chinese tech entrepreneur, coder, figured out that he can sit on top of ChatGPT 4.0, train some models, make it Chinese ready to go. This is basically on the tech side. You can do compute, you can do code gen, and he's basically taken an open source what OpenAI did with ChatGPT 4 and provided it into the market. And so what that means is it's going to be very easy for folks. It's pretty much democratized the access to AI. He's got a full model that's ready to go. It goes up to 70 billion parameters. You can actually put it on private if you got a quad CPU, so 4 CPUs you can run it, or a GPU. That's all the power you need to take it private, or you can run it in their model. The challenge is it's very censored. If you ask it about Tiananmen Square, you ask about Winnie the Pooh, you won't get any answers. But it's the Chinese flavor of OpenAI's ChatGPT 4.
And Holger, I guess, what do you see the impact of DeepSeek?
Oh, well, first of all, I'm surprised about the waves it has made, right? So, because two things are the key things to take away from my perspective. First of all, not having the best computing resource always makes for better models and software, right? This has been long since the mainframe. And obviously, China doesn't have availability of so many GPUs, so people get creative. And the essence is that distillation really worked, which was something which we knew before. The second thing, which is really important to watch, is this has been training without human intervention, right? And we're running out of humans, perceivable and skilled humans since many decades already, aka programmers or developers. So reaching these results without human supervision training is a very interesting thing. But it piggybacks on the work of larger models, which somebody has to create. And this is why I don't see the whole implication. We'll talk about the stock price later because it's too early to assess that.
And Andy, when it comes to DeepSeek, why do you think it's a game changer?
Well, it's because they proved a point that you don't need gazillion dollars to train an AI model, especially the LLM. So the NVIDIA, what they did was a little bit clever. They took the H100, the limitations. So NVIDIA created a specialized chips for them, which is actually equally powerful than the models that are restricted for export. So regardless of what, they trained using some combination, which we don't know the full details about, in about 6 million, 5.6 to be exact, that they trained a model that beats out every single model that's in the market today. That's why it's a pretty big deal. So they have proven not only that you can train cheap, but also the fact that you can open source the entire thing. So which means others can start using it or building it, which is going to challenge all these big guys. But one thing, let's be very, very clear. It's not about the model training or model hosting or infrastructure where the cost is. It's actually on the data collection. So the rumor has it that they stole the data from one of the other major providers. It's yet to come out, but the data collection is going to be a pretty big thing, a proper data collection bias removal. They're not giving the details on how they created it.
I think the important piece here is the fact that it only does code gen, it does the math, and it does the compute and the reasoning, right? That's the important piece. It doesn't do image and video yet at this moment, but they, from all sources, everyone's saying they stole all the ChatGPT 4 stuff and basically put a Chinese lens over it. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of IP battle that's going to be for OpenAI.
And just for the record, it's a very limited coding model. Right? If you would take models like this, you run into the same thing for that you have run in Copilot, that you will need like 4 or 5 different small distilled models to code, which nobody wants to do. Yeah, so let's keep that in mind as well.
So if I'm looking at this on a very limited use case perspective, like customer service, like I'm not going to be asking about Winnie the Pooh or any of those sensitive topics in China. I guess Chirag, if I'm a CxO, how should I be thinking about this? And, I mean, it's obviously a cheaper model, but, Llama's also cheap, and there are other open source models out there. How should I look at this as a CxO?
I think if you're a CxO, the best analogy, and if you go back 15, 20 years, what open source did to the industry, that's what this model is now doing to its competitors. I mean, the reason Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they've been here because there's a lot of open source software in its early days drove the consumption of cloud. And the software itself was pretty cheap to actually go run, and including VMware, there are a whole bunch of VMware instances running on the cloud. So now when you think about if you're a CxO, do you have two options. You can buy a Ferrari, and this Ferraris would be a high-end platform as a service model that does everything that you want a model to do, or there is going to be a smaller, specialized, narrow models that are cheaper to run, and they're almost free. When I say almost, meaning open source is not quite free. You still have to manage it, and you still have to run it, and you have to maintain it and whatnot. But I think as a CxO, you really want to watch out. You don't want to put all your chips into one vendor. You want to keep your options open, and you want to make sure that you are paying attention to what you need Gen AI for. You want to go back to the problem that you want to solve. And the point is, all I'm doing is I'm building a customer service chatbot. And if it's a fairly narrow model trained on very specific language, very specific domain, maybe this is good enough. But if you're a large engineering organization, if you are one of the GSIs, or if you're a large IT shop, if you're trying to empower 15,000, 20,000 engineers, is this the right model? Maybe not yet.
So Ray, I guess, how does this change how CxOs should think about compute costs and things like that?
Yeah, the bottom line is we've had this scenario where everything has gotten more expensive with AI. We talk about this all the time. Like in the AI era, it's closed, it's centralized. There's a few players and it's really expensive. And when we're thinking about what's happening with, the internet age, it was different, right? It was open, it was decentralized. There were lots of players, things were cheaper. And what we basically looking at here is at this point, we know that it's possible to do reasoning at a much lower cost than what these players are offering. And there's lighter models are going to be available. Right? We know that people are going to want to do this outside of the cloud and back on premises. There are companies like Samba Nova Systems, that have basically figured out how to do 1 trillion parameters for 1/10 the cost, right? So the cost curve, as you wrote, Larry, is coming down on AI, and I think you're going to see more of that. And I think those monetization models are important.
And Holger, you've been very vocal about, AI is a cloud workload. If you truly can run some of these models on, basic kind of hardware, does that change the on-premise equation a bit?
It only matters what you want to do with AI, right? If you're coding and you have a small coding model that can run a laptop, that's very, very powerful because algorithms and capabilities don't change. If I'm in an enterprise data use case, in any application in that space, the data is changing all the time. I need to make decisions all the time. So I cannot afford to run this learning on my laptop. I don't even have access to all the data. So I still see AI being a super elastic workloads, and elastic workloads move to the cloud. Yeah, so let's also not understand this is going to be smaller models going to be coming, smaller models being around for distilling larger models if you do this in a smart and good way. And there's different ways than the one they used, right? There is the whole Monte Carlo technique, which they also discuss in that paper. There's the reward model, which they discuss in that paper. It's not even clear if the time-based situation algorithm they used will solve that problem. So I see still larger models winning, cloud winning. If you might see a dip in revenue, that's totally possible. But the reason for that is that if you remember 5 years ago, NVIDIA was looking for use cases beyond the cloud, beyond AI, because nobody was using their chips in the cloud because they're too expensive and not cost effective, right? This is why everybody's building their own chips in the cloud. Google has been doing this since 10 plus years and isn't really for that reason, because it started early. So that's not going to change, right? That is the main thing why NVIDIA might not be doing the revenue in 2028 than they've been doing in 2024.
And devices, you would say this to kind of emphasize, to drive Holger's point home, that it's not either or situation. This is not a zero-sum game. It's not that large, LLMs that are, ridiculously expensive to kind of run, that cost will come down, but it's still an AI, it's a basic AI workload. And that's not going to change. So the market is obviously overreacting, not fully understanding what's going on. But the majority of the AI workload is still going to run in the cloud. but there is going to be edge use cases. I mean, we have seen TensorFlow being included sort of on Pixel phone, and you have edge computing, which has been proven on the networking side and on cybersecurity side. So there's going to be use cases on the inference side, or plenty of other use cases where you can potentially run a smaller,
95, right?
smaller, much more efficient model on a device, and it doesn't even have to be a laptop. Could be your phone. By the way, your phones are as powerful as your laptops, but you could do that. So I think it's an either or scenario. So if you are thinking about this DeepSeek, you should not be thinking about either or. It's the end situation. How can I use what I'm using, and I can use this to drive my cost down and solve the problems that in a much more efficient way.
So, Andy, are these NVIDIA worries, are they overblown at this point? Or how should we be thinking about this, big build out where everybody's basically trying to up each other? I'm spending 60 billion. Now I'm spending 80. Hey, here's 500 billion. It all sounds a little crazy to me.
Right. Well, sorry, go ahead. Finish your question.
Oh, so, I mean, should the supply chain be worried in terms of the American vendors?
Supply chain, no, because if you have to think about it, what are your options if you're going to build an LLM or you're trying to use it for inferencing at this point? You got to use one of those providers. You're not going to go wherever the pleasure they had of the Chinese infrastructure where they trained it. Again, they're not disclosing the full cost in full transparency, so we don't even know how much it costs. But regardless of what, when you have to even have those digital models or the full model itself, or some combination thereof, whether training for inferencing, you still have to use based on the infrastructure that's available in some of the Western countries. And, obviously there's a reason why Meta is building one of the largest gigawatt data center out there in Richardson. And you might have seen on the news that, India is planning a 3 gigawatt data center, which is the largest in the world going to be when it's finished. So people are spending a ton of money in it. It got to go somewhere. So I don't see a competition to the supply chain itself. But in case of NVIDIA, that remains to be seen, because if it comes out that truly they trained using AMD GPUs, the instructive GPUs as they claim, that could be a little bit of a dampener for NVIDIA. Plus the fact that, they used lower powered, more efficient H100s, that could be a problem for them too. But outside of that, I don't see the supply chain or the stock price letting down. I mean, it's a pullback now. It's a temporary setback, knee-jerk reaction, but it's going to continue for a while at least.
All right, so this is for you, Ray. I've seen you on all these financial TV shows talking about, the pullback and all this. And I got to admit, I think right back to Cisco back in 2000. How should we think about this stock valuation thing? Or is it really just apples and oranges? And if you're a customer, you don't necessarily care?
I don't think customers care, but I think from a valuation perspective, we have to figure out, is it make sense for a Microsoft to spend $80 billion a year on CapEx to build out data centers? The short answer is they're going to have to do it. It's really about the payback period that's going to actually hit them. The second question really is different, right? The second question is, do we need to pay this much for token economics, and should token economic costs come down? And we're living in a world what we call exponential efficiency. If you're not 10 times better, 1/10 the cost, nobody cares. And we're at this point where our existing software vendors have made life so expensive just because they need to keep an ACV to hold their stock price. And so this reset is a good thing in general, because it's going to lower the cost of technology for customers. It's a bad thing for stock investors, because we're going to see valuations plummet if you're not one of the winners.
So 2025 is always going to be the tough year for NVIDIA, right? During the acquisitions and the heyday, it's going to be interesting if they can keep up the growth or not. And I think the prime thing, which we'll never know the number, but what I would love to know is sit in the books of Microsoft and see how much of those 80 billions goes to NVIDIA or not, right? Obviously, Microsoft is tied to NVIDIA right now, to OpenAI, and with that to NVIDIA. The question is if Microsoft will do something else on the algorithm side, which will untie them and make them use their own custom hardware. Effectively right now, as it looks like, Microsoft in their hardware is competing to be cheaper than NVIDIA on OpenAI-like workloads. So that's the key thing to look at as an investor, if I was an investor.
So AI costs are going down regardless at this point? I mean, I guess they already have, right?
there's always Moore's law, right? It's going to get cheaper for the existing things, right? It's not going to be called Moore's law. Some people call it Jensen's law. And there's no question about that. But the demand for AI is so much bigger, right? What we've done right now, what OpenAI has done, what Google has done with Gemini, and so on, is they took the public data of the world, which has huge implications and benefits and lots of jobs in other parts. The enterprise data of the world is multiples of that, right? We have to run securely, safely, with no privacy concern, AI models in a combination of the two. And that's going to be significant growth. How fast depends on how the maturity is in the uptake in the SaaS side, because we know right now AI is going to be sold through SaaS, right? But that is going to be the key question to answer for the growth rate in my perspective.
There are ethical considerations and there are security considerations, and that community has been discussing some of those. By the way, someone just jailbroke the model, DeepSeek model, so you could go and say, oh, replace this letters with number 1, 2, and 3, and show me tell me a story about the man in the front of a tank. Yep. And the model actually goes and talks about Vietnam Square, even though the model is not supposed to do that. And someone jailbroke this thing on day 1. So there are implications on looking at prompt injection, looking at jailbreaking the models, and AI security is one of the biggest topics for CxOs. So if you don't know how the model has been trained, what data has been used, and if you don't know how easy or difficult it's going to be to actually break a specific model, do you really want to use that model for your most sensitive data that you would put it into that, and for your AI use cases? Are you really going to do that? So that's an open question. I think there's immense effort that goes on making something secure. So the primitives obviously get cheaper and cheaper, and we saw that with AWS coming up with their own models, and this is something that they had not done. They announced a sort of series of models during reInvent last year, a few months ago. So the cost is going to come down. The primitives are going to get cheaper and cheaper. But when people start building abstractions on top of that to make sure that they are usable and they can actually support the enterprise use cases, and then they are actually secured, and someone can guarantee that they are actually going to work, and nothing is actually going to get stolen, from the model, that's going to be a challenge. So I think we are in interesting times, and that's an area that I would watch.
So I guess this is for the group. You basically have to run this privately in a sandbox at this point, right? I mean, if you're willing to experiment, like I know, you can import it into Bedrock now and play around with it.
You want a sandbox. You want a sandbox if you don't want it to be put out there for everyone else to see, right? Or if you want to train someone else's model. This is why there's so much interest in being able to do this in a private cloud or having something air gapped. The challenge is like, can you afford to do it that way? And so at some point, you're going to have to access compute resources, as Holger mentioned. And so that may be your data center, or you may be your own device, or maybe you decide to light something up on a 4 CPU machine because you don't have a GPU. Those are all possible. It's just a question of how much time do you want to spend waiting for the query to come back.
So how should you think about your compute strategy? Is it all cloud for AI, or do you put aside a bit for on-prem or private cloud or whatever?
I just wrote the report. There's only one IT strategy, right? You have to move to the cloud. There's no way, right? So before it was optional. The AI workloads are elastic. Yes, I can have small AI workloads to put in a satellite to fly to Mars with no connectivity, deep in mines, on ships, on airplanes. Absolutely, right? I can build small models. There's no question about that. But if I want to have an enterprise model which knows and beats and works on the tact of my enterprise data, I have to do this in the cloud. There's no other way around it, right? I have to tie. The lesson learned from COVID was I need to tie my IT structure to my business success, right? It's not going to change if we're in the AI era. It's the same thing. So if my business is doing well and I consume more AI, I can spend more for cloud. If it's not doing well, then I'm going to spend less. So the hard question to ask is for people like HPE and Dell, if you want to put the financial perspective on that, how are they going to maintain the growth of that? How they're going to maintain AI model innovation in a secure airbag way. When is HPE? Let's put it up. HPE and Dell are going to come out. Here's your air-gapped Dell server with DeepSeek on it. Start the counter today. it will come, right? It will come, no question, right? But when will it go?
All right, final question. Is this China-US AI war? Is it just a headline to be sensationalist, or is it legit?
Is China versus rest of the world? Let's not forget other countries. This is a global war officially. And look, you cannot limit research. You cannot limit people's intellectual potential. You cannot limit people's ability to learn. People are going to learn. People are going to experiment. You can limit physical resources to some extent. You can limit access to some of the other things. You can limit access to trade, but it's very difficult to actually stop people from learning. And I think now, we are there, but someone actually proved that we can learn from other people's mistakes or what other people have done, and they actually built something that is essentially that shook the entire world. So we would expect to see other countries kind of taking on this lead too. And as Andy mentioned, India is just getting started. India has ambitions not only to actually go build one of the largest or the largest data centers, they might actually go build something similar that would look like DeepSeek, but much better. So I think we're just getting started. And I think if as sort of the US as a country, if you think about US as a nation, you really have to focus on innovation and differentiation on how you can actually serve better.
Yeah, what I would add to this is that
so if you're to think
in this era of exponential efficiency, your challenge is very simple. If you're not coming at 1/10 the cost and you're not 10 times better the first round, you don't get to play. In the second round, you have to come in at 1/10 the cost and be 10 times better. And this is similar to the analogy we use about UPI, right? Today we have payments and they suck. It's $25 a wire. It's $1.50 for ACH. In India, it's zero, right? Because 1.2 billion people are not going to be paying $1 each to do a transaction. That's just stupid, right? And it's stupid that we're paying that in the US as well. And so we're going to see that cost curve go down. And I think you're going to see more and more of this. Otherwise, there's no way we can use AI, and there's no way we can use the enterprise software we're using today because it's just way too expensive. So, Andy, sorry.
Go ahead, Andy.
No worries. So the thought is, if you were to think about it logically, the ByteDance's Dubo, which is actually an equivalent performing model, has been out there for a few months. Alibaba's Gwen model, which is when it was released, was beating OpenAI models at that time, has been around for 6 months. So this is not the first Chinese model that's beating out all the existing US or worldwide models. I question the timing of it. Maybe they wanted to time it in such a way that when US is making a flash, that they were splash rather, they want to come back and say that, look, we could do the two. So I question the timing of it. But having said that, this is not the only company from Chinese side. They are building these models. They are building models. They are experimenting. They are doing well. And it's going to be a war. You can limit all you want. They'll figure out a way. They'll stockpile the things what they need. So it is going to be a war of people building models. But it is not about just the models anymore. It's about how are you going to solve some business problems. That's where you need to concentrate.
Or run some military assets and so on. So I think the other thing to finish your question and to finish with Andy's point, right? What we know is that definitely DeepSeek is not the best model out of China, right? That they were allowed to publish this and seen as just saying, look, we guys are here, we're waving the flag, and you can now approximate if something is 2, 3, 10 exponentially better than what we just got shared to the world to be good citizens, right? So
this is tech earnings week, right? It wasn't an accident when it all happened this way, right? Between Trump's announcements and tech earning week, this was designed to rattle markets. This was designed to be able to say, hey, look, you guys don't have all the dominance. The reality, though, is, we're still ahead in the US, but at a cost curve, if we can't come down on the cost curve, we're in trouble. We're also behind on energy. China has 1,000 gigawatts, 10,000 gigawatts of coal-fired and oil-fired plants. They've got the capability to continue to build 7 to 9 small modular reactors. They've got hydro that's about to come up online. And so it's also a war on energy. If we can't get our energy costs down to 5 cents, 3 cents, then 1 cent a kilowatt hour, we're not going to play. We can't play in manufacturing. We can't play in AI. Europe's starting to realize this, right? They realize that all their green initiatives were kind of stupid, right? Because it's put them in a position where they're never going to be able to play. And so you're starting to see that pick up around the world. It's all energy options, and get that cost structure down and stop subsidizing like where I am here. Like, you know, our electrical companies are basically, we're paying for pensions, not for infrastructure, because we can't afford anything else.
All right. Well, I will leave it
So,
there.
yeah, before you close it out,
Okay, go.
I have a joke that I saw that my buddy posted. I have to mention this. He said he uploaded all his sensitive documents, social security number, marriage certificate, birth certificate, the whole 9 yards, and asked the DeepSeek model to say, can you go to the internet and find out if this information is leaked out anywhere else? And apparently DeepSeek came back and told him that we analyzed that, it's not there anywhere else, it's just with us. So the bottom line is use it with caution.
It's safe. It's with us. It's in China.
Nice. All right, folks. Good stuff. And we'll reconvene when the next DeepSeek launches from wherever.
Happy experimenting, people.
Thanks a
See
lot,
ya.
all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.